Hello and welcome back to our How to Paint series. We are continuing on today with our mighty Redemptor Dreadnought. I'm still pretty sure I got that name correct. And I've been teasing it for a few episodes now, so we are going to jump right into the plasma gun here, specifically the coils. And I do kind of have a bit of a list of paints that we're going to use. I have a Corax white to start with. Hopefully not shake the table too much. Just kind of want to get this paint nice and stirred. I haven't used it in quite a little while, and I'm actually using a new brush today. It is much smaller than the other two we've been using, and we want that to kind of get into a lot of the little smaller cracks and crevices we're going to be doing today. It's much more detailed work. If you don't have a smaller brush, you might be able to manage it just fine. Just kind of be aware that it will be a little bit more of a struggle. And we want our white pretty thin down. It's going to get covered up with a few layers, so we don't want it too chunky, just so it keeps the same amount of detail. And we're going to go ahead and, as best as we can, to not get it on any of the black we've already done, just fill up all of those little coils. And we're already getting into the weird angles, but we'll go ahead and get the top of this. And we don't only have this one side, the other side of the plasma gun also needs to be done, and that's where I feel like we're going to get into the very wacky angles, especially being a right-handed person doing the left-hand side of a model. If any of you are right-handed, you know the pain very well, and if you're left-handed, it's the exact opposite. And let's see if we can't get in here somewhat manageably. Fortunately, it's a little bit harder for me to see just because I'm not able to kind of get as close to the model with the bulk of it in my face. They make, you can get like these glasses that are basically magnifying glass, and I'm kind of interested in that. But at the same time, they are apparently pretty uncomfortable. Every time I see reviews, people are just like, yeah, I can't wear these for more than an hour without them hurting. So we might look into that at some point. But if you are interested in that, if you have trouble seeing kind of the smaller details, I think you can find it on Amazon. Just kind of look up, hobby magnifying glasses. Sometimes if you just search miniature painting equipment, you can find a ton of stuff just in Amazon's categories. Excuse me. And now that we have our white kind of as our base layer, again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It is going to get covered up here. We're going to go ahead and jump into, if I can find it here, a nice layer color, which means it's just a little bit thinner. It's not kind of as consistent as a standard base layer paint would be. And this is Techless Blue. It's the only kind of bright blue I actually have for the moment, but hopefully it'll do the job for us. Try not to peek the microphone. If you haven't seen any of my other parts, you don't know what I'm talking about, but every time I open up a GW paint pot, my microphone just hones in on it like it's the loudest thing in the world. It's really not, I promise. My microphone just is really weird about picking it up. And again, make sure we have it nice and thinned. We're going to do the same thing we did with the white, just a very liberal application here all over these coils. And if you can, you kind of want to leave a little bit of the bottom untouched. Just leave a little bit of that white kind of poking out. It'll help kind of give us a kind of glowing effect almost. And we won't get into it in this part, but I do want to try some dry brushing around just to kind of give it a effect like it is. It has light around it, so we'll be dry brushing the black on the gun here around the coils with a couple of shades of blue. We'll kind of give it a little bit of volume with our light. And again, we're going to be doing the exact same thing on this side. Being very careful not to get it on the black. It's a little bit more awkward. My hand is further back on the brush, unfortunately, so the control isn't nearly as great. And as best you can with a quick pass over, just make sure you get most of that white covered up. Again, you can leave a little bit on the top poking out, kind of like it's glowing. It helps with kind of giving you a natural kind of shading effect, which is really nice. And overall, this actually came out pretty decently. I don't have it with me right now, but I have a Imperial Guard Sentinel Walker that I've done the same effect on, and it looks really nice when it's done. It just has a kind of a handful of steps to doing it, which is the only problem. It's a little bit time consuming, but that's alright. We don't mind taking a little bit of extra time to get a really nice effect going. And we will do a little bit more on the bottom there. I'm not quite comfortable with the amount of white poking through. And there we are. That's probably going to be the kind of starting point. It's not going to have the kind of fully desired effect until we go back over it with dry brushing. But if you're comfortable with that, you know, it isn't a bad place just to kind of leave it there. If you are going to dry brush, I would recommend at least doing a little bit of the dry brush white just on the top of these coils. I'm getting text from numbers I don't recognize, sorry. And moving on with the tiny details, we're going to be jumping into a layer of, if I can show it properly, Balthazar Gold. You can use Retributor armor as well. Retributor armor, it's very difficult to say quickly. I like it for Ultramarines, but I feel like Balthazar is a little bit better on Dark Angels. But it's up to your preference. Again, peek the microphone, closing a paint pot of all things. I really will never understand why it does that. And again, a nice thin layer. It's very important to get some water mixed in with your metallic paint, otherwise it very quickly ends up looking too thick, more than your standard base paint will. And we'll be very careful to get as much as this as we can without getting it on the rest of the outer kind of shell here. And unfortunately, I'm sure you probably saw it if you watched the last few episodes, this kind of front piece opens up normally. The paint has now dried on it, and it will not open, which is fine by me. I don't really care about that. I think it's kind of a more static piece anyway, and I don't really have a reason to open it. But if that's something you're concerned about, just when your paint's drying, make sure you leave it open. That way it doesn't dry in a closed position. And this is the tricky part here, but we have a little bit of a trick to kind of getting these smaller raised up areas. If I can get just a little bit more paint on my brush. I always put too little on my palette and it ends up drying out before I'm done. But using kind of we don't have a curve in this brush nearly as well as the other one, but just using the kind of side or the edge of your brush, you can easily get those highlighted areas if you just push down very lightly. If you push too hard, your brush will automatically kind of fall into those recesses and it'll make the whole thing a moot point anyway. So be very careful with that and just kind of do your best. And your brush will naturally fill up all of that raised area, which is exactly what we want. Go back over it just a little bit. The nice thing about using such small amounts of paint is it dries very quickly. So by the time you move on to the next little portion, it's basically already dry. So we can come back and finish off. Just turn our model around and around. We're going to be doing that a lot this series, unfortunately. I think they do make a bigger paint handle normally, and I'll show it here. I use this Citadel brand paint handle for holding models. It's very great. I love it. There's a couple of other brands out there if you don't want to buy that. It's like 20 bucks, kind of expensive. But it's great. I highly recommend it. Not only with keeping your hands from kind of touching your model a lot, which is bad if your paint's drying, but also it helps with kind of stability in my case. And we'll get a little bit more paint to the palette here as we kind of talk about it. Move that out of the way a little bit. I do not want to spill any paint pots in this series. And we're going to be doing the kind of edge of the sarcophagus. But going back to the paint model holder thing, they also make a like XL version, and I think is meant for vehicles. I'm not sure how big that goes, what size base, but I kind of feel like it could fit a Dreadnought, right? I've seen it hold like a Land Raider. So maybe I'll check that out at some point. I don't really do enough vehicles to really warrant it, but you know, it'll be a fun little thing to kind of add to our arsenal of painting equipment. And this is a little bit more tricky, but we're just going to be doing the kind of sides of the Dreadnought here. We will be going back into that kind of crevice back there and doing more green, just because it looks kind of splotchy right now. But just doing the best we can, and don't be afraid to mess up. You can always go back over it. It's getting kind of as neatly in a line as we can here. Perfect. And we have just a little bit more paint on our palette. Hopefully this will do it. Come on. And I think that's just about it. There we are. I did kind of get a little bit there on the interior vent, but that's fine. We're going to actually be doing that in a silver anyway, so it doesn't matter. We're just going to go right back over it. And while we have it here, I almost forgot we're going to be doing just a tiny little bit more of our Balthazar Gold, because we have the flamer installed on the left hand of our model. Had to think about which way was left there, my left or his left. And not the whole thing, but we do want to do kind of this flame, like heat shield, I think is what you call it. And if you have some washes, you can get kind of a really nice effect, like it's been burned, right? Like he's been firing it. And we'll probably get to that either next part or the part after that. I think next part we're going to focus on dry brushing if we can, and doing some edge highlighting. So we'll see exactly how long that takes us. But I think in terms of Balthazar Gold, that's kind of it for now. We will always come back and kind of do a little bit of cleanup duty on areas that we think need it. But we're going to be moving on to our silver and getting into the kind of crevices alongside the sarcophagus there. If I have it on my desk. Good Lord, I don't think I came prepared. Never mind, it's hiding. That's awkward. I swore I had it on my desk already, so there we are. It was just tucked behind all the other paints. It's not on view right now, unfortunately, but I have like 50 paint pots just sitting on my desk. That's okay. I'm still getting my room set up after the move, so everything's a little bit disjointed and kind of just in random places right now. And again, this is a little bit more difficult because that front piece isn't able to open, but we just want to get kind of all these little coils and conduits running down alongside the sarcophagus. And it doesn't take much, just a quick pass over, just to make it look nice and neat and uniform. It was a little bit splotchy before. And perfect. I'm trying to see, we're kind of figuring out what we want to do as we go along here in terms of cleanup. The front of our plasma gun unfortunately managed to get some black on it last time while we were doing the rest of the model. So we're going to be going right back over that with another layer of silver. And if you're really pedantic, and actually in this model I might, you can do the inside of the barrel there. Normally I wouldn't worry about it, it's not really visible enough, but with the kind of way that our model is facing, it is. So we'll see if we can't just very quickly get a little bit of silver all alongside the inside of that barrel. The nice thing about using cheap brushes is you don't really have to worry about damaging it by doing things like this. Normally you don't want to shove your brush into a just random nook and cranny of your model, but that's what it's for, and we're going to use it to that capacity. We also are going to go down kind of on the feet here. I will be doing I don't know what you call them, the toes, I guess. We'll be doing those with a layer of green. I kind of forgot about it last time. As always, I always forget something. But we are doing these kind of joints with another layer of silver, just because it got covered up last time. Just to get a little bit more of a clean, kind of unified look here. And we'll just fill in kind of all of the areas that we see throughout. Perfect. I think I talked about it in one of the previous episodes, but as always, I really love Dark Angel's lore. Something that I don't get is the whole thing with Luther, right? And this is kind of like spoilers, but Luther went with the Fallen, right? I think I haven't really gone past the heresy era stuff. I don't know, I know in the lore right now, like the Fallen are the Forgiven or whatever, and I think that's great. I think that's really cool. But in the second book of the Horus Heresy specifically, Luther like turns to chaos, kind of unintentionally, right? And he manages to do all this because he kind of inadvertently betrayed the lion in the first book, and instead of punishing him like you would, and just getting rid of him, instead the lion sends him to Caliban, and he basically tells him to raise the next several generations of Dark Angels. And for getting him out of the way, that's kind of a perfect plan. And he does the same thing with all of the Psychers, right? Because he doesn't like Psychers, despite being made by one. But whatever. But the problem with that is you have this guy who you do not trust. Like he tried to kill you, and whether his intentions were misplaced or whatever, that's a whole different issue. But now you're sending him to be in charge of the rest of your soldiers, your home world. And of course, there's the whole thing with the rock being formed and Caliban blowing up, basically. But the lion is like a tactical genius, comparable to Robo Gurliman, right? And I love GW, and I love their writing, I love their books, but good lord, it's such a weak plot point in my eyes. I just feel like it's very out of character for him. Like he's considered to be socially inept, right? And they really portray that very well. But then they kind of make him do a really dumb move that is just super out of character by sending Luther away instead of just imprisoning him or straight up exiling him. I don't know. It's just a wacky plot point to me. And while we do a little bit of cleanup of our model, I figured we'd talk about it, right? And I also have to say, it's been kind of a minute since I've read it, but I don't really understand the whole Lord Cypher thing. Because it seems like in the current era, he's back with the Dark Angels, and I know it's not like a one guy, right? It's like a title that gets given to them. But it seems like he kind of kickstarts the whole Caliban falling to chaos thing. And I can't tell if he's meant to be like bad or if he has misplaced intentions. It's very difficult to tell. But that's all right. I'm chugging through the rest of the Horus Heresy, and I'm sure it'll come to light kind of as we go along. We're going to be moving on to these exhaust pieces up here. I unfortunately managed to cover them up with a little bit of green last time, so I just want to do a little bit of touch-up work on them. And once we're kind of finished and we move on to washes, we will be covering those in non-oil. It'll give us a really nice kind of grease, grimy effect, and that looks really nice on all of the more metal parts of your model. And I think we'll also be doing this cog with a little bit of silver. We could do it gold. On my other Dreadnought, it is gold, but I feel like I want to change up a little bit here. I don't want them all looking the same. Perfect. Another thing that I kind of question is, you have the Omnissiah, and I thought about this because of the cog. And in the Horus Heresy era, it's basically considered that the Emperor is the Omnissiah, right? And that's kind of part of why the... Sorry for the weird jump cut there. Unfortunately, my alarm went off on my phone, and I didn't realize it actually ended my recording. So I continued painting for about 5 more minutes, and my Audacity was still running, so I thought everything was fine. No, turns out that I was just painting, talking to myself. So we didn't do anything too crazy. We did finish that cog up. I think that's kind of where we left off, where it was still recording at least. And basically all I did after that was just do cleanup with the kind of Caliban green, the front panels and everything. So that's about it. Luckily, though, we did get through, I think, some 20 minutes of recording, which is good for an episode. So I'm actually going to end it anyway. So the timing works out, right? We just missed about 3 minutes of panel painting. Not too bad. Unfortunately, it did interrupt my rant about the Omnissiah, and it's just lore stuff. But next time we'll talk more about it. I promise. If you're interested in that. If not, don't worry about it. Anyway, though, I do have a Patreon. I just want to shout that out. If you guys like this video and you want to see more of it more often, that does help me kind of get new models, new paints, new equipment to record this, and it just helps me out a lot in general. Otherwise, just like, comment, and subscribe if you are so inclined. I greatly appreciate it, and it helps me kind of not only get feedback but also interact with you guys. Thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I will see you in the next episode.